He thought it was just a small act of kindness, a cup of coffee handed to a stranger shivering on a cold morning. But years later, that same stranger would walk into a courtroom, not as a defendant, but as the man holding his fate in his hands. The morning was bitterly cold, the kind of cold that made the city's glass towers look even less human. Mark Reynolds, a young lawyer in his late 20s, tightened his scarf as he walked briskly toward his office. Deadlines, clients, and endless paperwork weighed on his shoulders. Yet, as he crossed the street corner near the subway entrance, his eyes caught sight of a man sitting on the pavement. His clothes were ragged, his beard unkempt, and his eyes spoke the quiet desperation of someone who had been invisible for too long. Most people walked past him without even turning their heads. Mark almost did too. But something inside him made him stop. He looked at the man, really looked at him. And saw not just a homeless figure, but a human being, shivering in the morning chill. Without thinking much, Mark ducked into the cafe just beside the corner and ordered a large cup of hot coffee and a sandwich. Returning, he bent down, handed it over, and said softly, "Here, this should help." The man looked up with surprise. His cracked lips quivered as he whispered, "Thank you. God bless you." His voice was raspy, almost as though he hadn't spoken much in days. Mark smiled faintly, nodded, and went on his way. He didn't even ask for the man's name. To him, it was just a small act, something good to balance out the otherwise cutthroat world he lived in. But for the man on the pavement, it was more than food or coffee, it was acknowledgement, dignity, and warmth. That moment carved itself quietly into both their lives, though Mark wouldn't know it for years to come. Mark's career grew steadily. Long nights at the firm, endless cups of coffee, and climbing the brutal ladder of success slowly turned him into a well-respected lawyer. But in his ambition, he often forgot about that day on the corner. He forgot the man with tired eyes and cracked lips. Life became a blur of boardrooms, files, and verdicts. Yet fate has a way of circling back, and it was not finished with Mark Reynolds. Years passed. The city changed, skyscrapers grew taller, faces in his office changed, and Mark aged into his late 30s, sharper, wealthier, but also lonelier. And then, one morning, the call came. A high-profile case. A legal storm that could define his career. A lawsuit involving a major corporation accused of exploiting vulnerable communities. Mark was ready for battle. He walked into the courtroom with confidence. But as he adjusted his tie and prepared to face the opposing counsel, his eyes froze. Standing across the courtroom was a man in a dark suit, hair neatly trimmed, eyes sharp and clear. He looked confident, commanding. And when those eyes met Mark's, a flicker of recognition sparked, first in confusion, then in shock. Because it was him. The man from the street corner. The homeless man. Except he wasn't homeless anymore. He was the lead attorney on the other side. And now, Mark wasn't sure if the battle ahead was about the law, or about fate settling a score. The shock rattled through Mark as he sat down at his table. His mind scrambled to process what he had just seen. Could it really be the same man? Years had passed since that freezing morning when he had handed a stranger a cup of coffee. Maybe it was just a resemblance. But the way the man looked back at him, those eyes, sharp yet familiar, there was no mistake. It was him. The judge entered, the room rose, and proceedings began, but Mark's focus wavered. Every word spoken seemed to echo against the realization gnawing inside him. His opponent, introduced as Daniel Hayes, carried himself with authority. His opening statement was precise, powerful, and articulate. He wasn't just good, he was exceptional. As Daniel spoke, Mark kept seeing flashes of the man he once helped. The shivering figure on the cold concrete, clutching a coffee cup with trembling hands. And now, this. At recess, Mark stepped outside the courtroom. He found himself unable to resist. He walked up to Daniel, who was reviewing some notes near the hallway. "Excuse me," Mark began cautiously, I know this might sound odd, but have we met before?" Daniel looked at him for a moment, silent. A faint smile curved on his lips, though his eyes held no warmth. "Yes, we have. Years ago. But I doubt you'd remember." Mark swallowed hard. "The coffee shop corner." Daniel nodded once. "You gave me coffee when I had nothing. I never forgot." Mark's heart thudded in his chest. I didn't expect to see you like this," he admitted honestly. Daniel closed his file, his tone steady. "Life has a strange sense of humor. That day, it changed me. You were the first person in months who saw me as human. I decided I would never stay invisible again. I worked. I fought. I built myself back. And now, here we are." His words carried no resentment, no bitterness, only calm certainty. But then his expression hardened slightly. "Make no mistake, Mark. In here, I'm not the man you helped. I'm your opponent. And I intend to win." With that, he turned back toward the courtroom, leaving Mark standing in the hallway, stunned. The rest of the trial unfolded like a storm. Both men clashed fiercely, exchanging arguments with razor-sharp precision. The courtroom became a battlefield of intellect, each side refusing to yield. But beneath the legal duel, there was something deeper at play. For Mark, it wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about understanding how a small act of kindness had somehow come full circle to this moment. For Daniel, it was about proving not just his case but also his journey, showing the world, and perhaps Mark himself, how far he had come. The tension between them grew heavier with each passing day. And though Mark respected Daniel's brilliance, he couldn't shake the feeling that destiny had placed them on opposite sides for a reason neither of them yet understood. The trial stretched on for weeks. Every day, Mark and Daniel locked horns. The media buzzed around the case, calling it one of the most significant battles of the year. But for the two men inside, it was personal in ways no one else could see. During breaks, Mark found himself reflecting on his own life. He thought of his long hours, his relentless climb, and the loneliness that success hadn't cured. And then he thought of Daniel. The man who had clawed his way from the streets to the courtroom, armed with resilience, determination, and a sense of purpose. Mark couldn't deny it, Daniel's story humbled him. One night, unable to sleep, Mark searched Daniel's background. The story unfolded like a movie. Daniel had once been a promising college student. A series of personal tragedies, financial collapse, and loss had dragged him to the streets. But after years of struggle, he had found his footing again. Community shelters, odd jobs, night classes, and sheer grit had pulled him back up. Eventually, he earned scholarships, graduated, and fought his way into law. His rise was nothing short of extraordinary. And through it all, he had carried that one memory, a stranger who had stopped and handed him coffee on a freezing day. Mark felt something shift inside him. He realized the true weight of what kindness could do. A small act he had almost forgotten had played a part, no matter how small, in Daniel's journey. But now, that journey stood against him. Their courtroom battles grew fiercer, but so did their mutual respect. They were opponents, yes, but also mirrors, each man reflecting what the other could have been under different circumstances. And somewhere deep down, both knew this case wasn't just about law. It was about redemption, resilience, and the strange way life weaves connections across time. The final day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed, tension hanging thick in the air. Both Mark and Daniel knew this was it, the culmination of weeks of arguments, evidence, and strategy. Mark delivered his closing argument with passion, laying out his case with every ounce of skill he had. Daniel followed, his words powerful, almost poetic, weaving law and humanity into every sentence. The judge listened intently, and when the gavel finally struck, the decision came. It was close. Very close. And though Mark fought brilliantly, it was Daniel's side that won. A hush fell over the room. Daniel exhaled, his composure unshaken, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of emotion. Mark sat back, a wave of defeat and admiration washing over him. For a moment, he closed his eyes. And when he opened them, he saw Daniel walking toward him. "You fought well," Daniel said quietly. "Better than most I've ever faced." Mark stood, extended his hand, and said with sincerity, "So did you. More than well. You've built something incredible, Daniel. And I'm glad I was there, at the start, even if I didn't know it." Daniel shook his hand firmly. "You reminded me I was still human when I thought I was nothing. I owe part of my journey to that. But today proves we both are exactly where we're meant to be." As they parted ways, Mark realized that winning or losing didn't matter. What mattered was that a single act of kindness had created a ripple that traveled across years, shaping destinies. Daniel walked out victorious, not just in court, but in life. And Mark walked out with a new understanding, that kindness, no matter how small, is never wasted. It lives on, shaping futures in ways we may never predict. The city lights glowed as Mark stepped outside. He thought back to that cold morning years ago, to the simple act of handing over a coffee. He smiled faintly. Life had brought the story full circle, reminding him that humanity is never lost. It just waits for someone to see it. And sometimes, when you least expect it, it comes back to stand before you. Even in a courtroom, this story proves that no act of kindness is ever wasted. A single cup of coffee changed two destinies forever. If this touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Spread kindness today. Share this video, subscribe to Kindness Vibes, and be the reason someone believes in humanity again. Because your one small act could change the course of someone's life.